My name is Kay Williams, 67 years old, with silver hair and enough life experience to know when I am not wanted. That Wednesday afternoon, my son-in-law Adam set his coffee mug down with purpose and said, "We need space, Kay. Can you stay elsewhere for a while?" I took a slow sip of my chamomile tea, letting the warmth spread through my chest as I looked around the home my late husband and I had paid off 30 years ago. "Sure," I smiled. "Once you move out of my house." Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you are watching from and hit that subscribe button if you want more stories about standing your ground. Life has a way of teaching you what matters most when you least expect it. For me, the lesson came after 42 beautiful years with my husband Thomas. He was my rock, my compass, my everything. We built our life together in this 2-story craftsman home in a quiet neighborhood just outside Portland. Thomas was meticulous about planning for our future. We paid off our mortgage when I was just 37 years old, a fact that made us the envy of our friends. When Thomas died suddenly of a heart attack 5 years ago, the world I knew crumbled. One minute we were planning our dream trip to Alaska, and the next I was planning his funeral. The grief was overwhelming, but having our home fully paid for gave me security when everything else felt uncertain. My relationship with my only daughter, Melissa, has always been close but respectful. Growing up, she was spirited and independent traits that served her well as she built her career as an environmental engineer. I tried to give her space to make her own decisions while being there when she needed me. When she met Adam Preston at a colleague's wedding, I was genuinely happy for her. Adam swept into our lives like a cool breeze on a hot summer day. Tall with sandy brown hair and intelligent green eyes, he worked for a tech company that specialized in sustainable energy solutions. At first meeting, I was impressed by his charm, the way he asked thoughtful questions about my volunteer work, and how he looked at my daughter with what seemed like genuine devotion. When Melissa announced their engagement, after just 8 months of dating, I had momentary concerns but kept them to myself. After all, at 35, Melissa knew her own mind. They married 3 years ago in a small ceremony in our backyard garden, with just 30 guests surrounding them as they exchanged vows under the maple tree Thomas and I had planted when we first moved in. The housing market in San Francisco, where they both worked, was brutal for young professionals. Even with their combined incomes, they struggled to find a place they could afford that wasn't a cramped studio apartment or an hours-long commute from their offices. "Why don't you move in with me for a while?" I suggested during a Sunday phone call 6 months after their wedding. "You can have the entire basement suite. Thomas renovated it before he passed, and it has its own bathroom and kitchenette. You could save for your own place, and honestly, this house feels too empty sometimes." They discussed it privately and accepted my offer a week later. I imagined it as a temporary arrangement, perhaps a year or two. Adam expressed gratitude, promising they would contribute to utilities and help with maintenance. Melissa hugged me tightly, whispering, "This means so much to us, Mom." The early days of our shared living arrangement were genuinely harmonious. We established comfortable routines, family dinners on Sunday evenings, but separate meals during the week. I maintained my volunteer schedule at the local library, my twice-weekly yoga class, and my Thursday night book club with friends I'd known for decades. They had their space, and I had mine. Adam showed interest in Thomas's vegetable garden, which had fallen into neglect after his death. Together, Adam and I spent weekends turning over soil planting, tomatoes, and zucchini, talking about sustainable gardening practices. Those early conversations in the garden are some of my fondest memories of our relationship. He seemed genuinely interested in learning from me. Melissa knew all the details about the house ownership. After Thomas passed my lawyer, Eleanor had helped me prepare proper documentation. The house was solely in my name, though my will specified Melissa would inherit it upon my death. We had discussed this openly, with Melissa expressing gratitude, but also insisting I should consider my own needs first if I ever wanted to downsize or move. Adam, however, never asked about these specifics. I realized later he simply assumed the house would be jointly owned by Melissa and me, or perhaps he thought Thomas had left it to both of us. That misunderstanding would prove crucial later. I maintained the primary bedroom upstairs while they took over the renovated basement that Thomas had originally created as an in-law suite for my mother, who passed before she could use it. The arrangement gave us all privacy while allowing us to share common spaces. Our neighbors and friends admired our multi-generational living arrangement. My friend Judith called it sensible and loving. My next-door neighbor Frank, who had known Thomas and me for 30 years, often commented on how nice it was to see the house filled with life again. Even my sister Linda, who lives in Arizona and is typically critical of everything, approved of the arrangement during her annual visit. I felt hopeful. Not only was I helping the young couple save for their future, but I was enjoying their company and felt less alone in the house filled with memories of Thomas. The arrangement seemed perfect until it wasn't. The first subtle shift came after Adam received a significant promotion at his tech company about 8 months after they moved in. I prepared a special dinner to celebrate Thomas's famous prime rib recipe that I saved for special occasions. During the meal, I noticed Adam's eyes surveying the dining room with new intensity, as if seeing it for the first time. "We should really update this dining set," he said, casually cutting into his meat. "Something more modern would brighten up the space." It was the first indication that Adam viewed my house not as a temporary home but as a space he intended to mold to his preferences. I didn't recognize it as a warning sign then. I wish I had. The changes in Adam were subtle at first, like raindrops before a storm. His promotion came with a substantial pay increase, and with it a shift in his attitude that was almost imperceptible initially. The respectful, grateful son-in-law began to fade, replaced by someone with growing expectations and thinning patience. It started with small comments about my decor. "These curtains are blocking so much natural light," he'd observe while working on his laptop in the living room. Or, "This coffee table takes up too much space for such a small room." I didn't mind constructive suggestions. The house was built in the 1970s, and some updates would be reasonable. But soon suggestions turned into actions without consultation. One Tuesday, I returned from my volunteer shift at the library to find my floral sofa covers replaced with sleek gray ones. "We picked these up this weekend," Adam explained when I noticed. "The old ones were looking worn and these are stain-resistant." He didn't ask if I liked them or if I minded the change. The old covers made by my mother were nowhere to be found. Around this time, I began overhearing Adam referring to the property as our house when speaking to friends on the phone or colleagues who occasionally visited. Never once did he acknowledge it was primarily my home that I was sharing with them. The distinction might seem petty, but words reflect underlying attitudes, as Thomas always said. "Your collection of porcelain birds is gathering dust and taking up space in the living room," Adam mentioned one evening as I was reading in my favorite armchair. "We should move them to your bedroom, to create a cleaner look down here." The birds had been gifts from Thomas, one for each anniversary. Moving them felt like moving pieces of my heart, but I compromised, selecting a few favorites to keep on display and relocating the rest. Compromise seemed reasonable to maintain household harmony. Melissa was increasingly caught in the middle. When I would privately express concerns about changes Adam was making, she would sigh and say, "He just has an eye for design, Mom. He wants the place to look nice, especially since his boss might visit." As Adam's influence grew, Melissa seemed increasingly torn between us. When I tried to have private conversations with her about the shifting dynamics, she was always too busy or too tired from work. Our once close relationship began to fray around the edges. My friend Judith noticed the tension during her monthly visit for coffee. "Kay, you seem on edge in your own home," she observed quietly, as Adam's footsteps could be heard above us. "Is everything okay with the living arrangement?" I brushed off her concerns, not ready to admit even to myself that something was changing. But that evening I discovered Thomas's treasured vinyl collection, over 200 albums collected throughout our marriage, had been moved to the attic without my permission or knowledge. When I confronted Adam, he seemed genuinely surprised by my upset. "They were just collecting dust in the den," he explained. "And we need that space for my home office, since I'm working remotely 3 days a week now. I put them carefully in protective cases." His tone was reasonable, but his eyes held no real empathy for what those records meant to me. As weeks passed, Adam began monitoring and commenting on my expenses and activities. Another new book, Kay, he'd ask, spotting a library book on the counter. "I thought you had a stack unread upstairs. Or do you really need to run the air conditioning during the day when you're the only one home?" Our electric bill was pretty high last month. The house that had once been my sanctuary began to feel less like my own space. I found myself hesitating to use the kitchen if Adam was working from home, not wanting to disturb him with the noise. I would wait until they were out to watch my favorite shows in the living room rather than risk Adam's subtle sighs or comments about outdated programming. Adam convinced Melissa they needed to modernize the house, starting with the kitchen. Without consulting me, they ordered new stainless steel appliances to replace the perfectly functional white ones Thomas and I had purchased 10 years prior. When the delivery men arrived, I was shocked but said nothing, not wanting to create tension. "You'll love cooking on the new induction range," Adam assured me, though I had never complained about the existing stove. "And the smart refrigerator will track our groceries." A particularly telling incident occurred during a dinner party they hosted for Adam's colleagues. As I offered to refill drinks for guests, Adam smoothly interjected, "Mom's always taking care of everyone, isn't she? Old habits die hard. But tonight you're a guest too, Kay. Just relax." His words seemed thoughtful on the surface, but the message was clear. This was their event, their home, and I was being positioned as an elderly relative, not the homeowner. When I tried to share a story about the neighborhood's history with Adam's boss, Adam quickly redirected the conversation to their future renovation plans for their home. That night I began documenting these incidents in a journal, wondering if I was overreacting or if there was truly cause for concern. The entries were factual and unemotional. October 12th, Adam replaced living room curtains without discussion. October 18th, Adam referred to master bedroom as eventually our room when showing friend around house. When I tried to establish reasonable boundaries, asking to be consulted before changes were made to common areas, for instance, I was met with passive-aggressive responses. "Of course, Kay. It's just that Melissa and I are so busy with work sometimes, it's easier to make decisions quickly when we see something that would work well. We're just trying to help modernize the space." The implied message my input would slow things down, my taste was outdated, their improvements were doing me a favor. My sleep became restless, and my appetite diminished. At my annual checkup, Dr. Marshall noted my blood pressure was elevated for the first time in my life. "Any new stressors, Kay?" she asked. I minimized the situation, not ready to articulate what was happening in my own home. What troubled me most was how reasonable Adam could make everything sound. Each change, each comment in isolation seemed minor, even thoughtful. It was the accumulation, the pattern that was concerning, and the growing feeling that I was being systematically edged out of my own home. By the 1-year mark of our shared living arrangement, the subtle undercurrents of tension had developed into a steady current, flowing through every interaction. Adam began hosting frequent business gatherings without giving me advance notice. I would return from my book club or volunteer work to find the living room filled with his colleagues, my carefully arranged furniture rearranged to accommodate his guests. "Sorry for the short notice, Kay," he would say in front of his colleagues. It was a last-minute planning session, but his apologetic words never translated into changed behavior. The pattern repeated week after week. More disturbing was the gradual disappearance of my personal photos from the common areas. The large framed photo of Thomas and me on our 30th anniversary vacation to Hawaii vanished from the entryway, replaced by a modern, abstract print. The gallery wall of family photos going back 3 generations was removed from the hallway, the nail holes spackling over before I could object. "We just thought a cleaner look would make the space feel larger," Melissa explained when I finally asked about the missing photos. "All your pictures are safe in those photo storage boxes we bought. They're in your closet." My beloved garden space, once a source of joy and connection with Adam, became the next battlefield. "We need more entertainment space outdoors," Adam announced over breakfast one Saturday. By afternoon, he had contractors measuring my vegetable garden for a stone patio extension. "But this is where I grow my tomatoes and herbs," I protested. "We can get you some nice container plants for the edge of the patio," Adam countered smoothly. "Much less maintenance for you." The loss of the garden Thomas and I had tended for decades felt like losing a piece of him all over again. But what could I say that wouldn't make me sound like a sentimental old woman refusing progress? Adam's carelessness with my possessions became increasingly apparent. My crystal vase, a wedding gift from my grandmother, was accidentally knocked from its shelf while Adam was rearranging to make space for his sound system. My collection of first edition mystery novels somehow got water damage during one of his impulsive kitchen sink upgrades. "These things happen," he would say with a shrug. "Maybe it's a sign we should declutter a bit." Melissa's work travel increased substantially during this period. As an environmental engineer, she was often called to project sites across the country, sometimes for a week at a time. This left Adam and me alone in the house, more frequently intensifying the uncomfortable dynamic between us. With Melissa absent, Adam became even bolder in excluding me from decisions about the house. He had the living room repainted while I visited my sister Linda in Arizona for 5 days. He replaced the mailbox Thomas had hand-painted with our family name, with a sleek modern one, featuring only their last name, Preston. When I tried to address these issues directly, Adam became a master of gaslighting. "We discussed the paint color last month, Kay. Don't you remember? You said any neutral would be fine." Or, "The mailbox was damaged in that windstorm. I thought I was doing you a favor by handling it." I began to question my own memory, wondering if perhaps we had discussed these changes and I'd forgotten. Was this normal aging, or was I being manipulated? A particularly disturbing pattern emerged. I would return home from errands to find my bedroom door unlocked when I distinctly remembered locking it. Nothing seemed missing or disturbed, but the violation of privacy left me uneasy. When I mentioned this to Adam, he suggested that perhaps I was forgetting to lock it, or maybe the old door hardware was faulty. "Senior moments happen to everyone," he said, with a patronizing smile. "My grandmother started writing reminder notes for herself around your age." Adam began casually mentioning retirement communities in conversation, particularly when Melissa was present. "My client's mother just moved into Sunny Pines," he would say. "She loves the social activities and not having to worry about home maintenance. She says she wishes she'd done it sooner." Or, "I read an article about how seniors who downsize earlier rather than later have better health outcomes and less stress." These comments were always presented as casual observations, never direct suggestions, which made them difficult to challenge without seeming defensive. My longtime neighbor Barbara witnessed Adam's disrespect one afternoon when she stopped by to share extra tomatoes from her garden. Adam interrupted our conversation, repeatedly spoke over me, and eventually suggested that you ladies might be more comfortable chatting on the porch so I can finish my work call in the living room. After he walked away, Barbara looked at me with concern. "How long has he been treating you like a guest in your own home, Kay? This isn't right." Her outside perspective validated what I had been feeling but struggling to name. Still, I wondered if moving out might be the best way to preserve my relationship with Melissa. I began looking at senior apartments, not because I wanted to move, but because I was starting to believe it might be inevitable. The situation reached a new low when I returned home early from a doctor's appointment to find Adam showing my bedroom to his friend Trevor. "And once Kay moves out, this will make a perfect home office," I overheard him say. "It gets the best natural light in the house." I stood frozen in the hallway, unseen by either man, as Adam continued. "We've been planting the seeds for a while now. Melissa agrees it would be better for her mom to be in a place with people her own age and some support staff. This house is too much for someone her age to manage anyway." I slipped away before they discovered me, my heart pounding with hurt and anger. That evening I called my lawyer friend Sandra to discuss my rights and options. She confirmed what I already knew: as the sole owner, I had every right to stay in my home or ask them to leave. The decision was entirely mine. "Document everything," Sandra advised. "Keep a record of all these incidents. And Kay, don't sign anything Adam or anyone else gives you without having me review it first." My relationship with Melissa had grown increasingly distant as Adam worked to isolate her from me. Our once close bond had frayed to brief surface-level interactions. When I tried to talk to her about my concerns, she seemed distracted and dismissive. "Adam just wants what's best for all of us," she would say. "He's thinking about our future. I'm sure he doesn't mean to make you feel pushed aside." The final straw came when I found brochures for Whispering Pines Senior Living Community on the kitchen counter, complete with pricing information, and a sticky note in Adam's handwriting that read, "Schedule tour for Kay." The brochure featured images of elderly residents engaged in crafts and card games with tiny apartments that couldn't accommodate even a quarter of my belongings or memories. It became crystal clear. Adam believed he would inherit my house when I moved out. In his mind, I was merely an obstacle to overcome an inconvenient houseguest, overstaying my welcome in what he already considered his property. What Adam didn't know, what he had never bothered to ask or learn, was that the house had always been and remained solely in my name. The tension in the house reached its breaking point on a rainy Thursday evening in November. Adam was hosting yet another work event, this one larger than previous gatherings. That morning over breakfast, he had casually mentioned that I might want to make myself scarce for the evening. "Some important clients will be here," he explained, not meeting my eyes as he scrolled through his phone. "We'll be using the entire main floor. Probably best if you find somewhere else to be from about 6 until 10 or 11. I nodded silently, already planning my response to this latest slight. Instead of leaving as requested, I decided to quietly observe from the upstairs hallway, just out of sight of the gathering below. Dressed in a smart blue cardigan and slacks, I sat in the window seat at the top of the stairs listening. The house filled with voices, laughter, the clink of glasses. From my vantage point, I could hear most conversations clearly, including Adam as he led a tour through the main floor. "We're planning a complete renovation of the kitchen next spring," he told his colleagues, his voice carrying up the stairwell. "Knocking out that wall will create an open concept flowing into the dining and living areas." That wall held the built-in china cabinet Thomas had crafted by hand for our 10th anniversary. Adam had never once mentioned plans to remove it. Later in the evening, Adam and two men moved to the foot of the stairs, their voices lowered but still audible to me above. "Beautiful place," one man commented. "You and Melissa must have saved for years." Adam laughed softly. "Actually, it's Melissa's family home. Her mother has been living with us since her father passed." The deliberate inversion of our arrangement made my blood boil, but I remained silent, listening. Speaking of which, the other man said, "How's the, situation progressing? Any luck convincing the old lady to move to a facility?" "Working on it," Adam replied confidently. "I've got tours scheduled at 3 places next week. Once we get her settled elsewhere, we can finally make this place what it should be. You know how it is with that generation, they resist change, get emotionally attached to things." "My wife went through the same thing with her father," the first man commiserated. "Sometimes you have to be cruel to be kind." "Exactly," Adam agreed. "It's really best for everyone. She can't manage a house this size at her age anyway." I'd heard enough. I retreated to my bedroom, locking the door behind me, my mind racing with hurt and anger. But beneath those emotions, a sense of clarity emerged. Adam had shown his true colors, and now I knew exactly what I was dealing with. The next morning, after Adam's guests had departed and Melissa had left early for work, Adam arranged what he clearly intended to be a formal intervention. He sat at the dining room table with a folder of materials and asked me to join him for coffee. "Kay," he began in that patient tone reserved for children, "and the elderly Melissa and I have been thinking a lot about your future and what would be best for everyone." He slid the Whispering Pines brochure across the table, open to a page showing a calendar of activities. "They have an opening for a 1-bedroom unit next month. I've taken the liberty of putting down a refundable deposit to hold it." I poured myself a cup of tea from the pot on the table, remaining silent. "The community has everything you could need," Adam continued, gaining confidence from my silence. 3 meals a day in their dining hall, weekly housekeeping, transportation to appointments, and lots of social activities for people your age. I sipped my tea, watching him over the rim of my cup. "We really need our space, Kay," he said, leaning forward with practiced sincerity. "Melissa and I are thinking about starting a family soon, and this house would be perfect once we make some updates. And honestly, at your age, independent living isn't always the safest option. What if you fell when no one was home?" I set my cup down carefully on its saucer. "You seem to have given this a lot of thought, Adam." "We both have," he assured me, though Melissa was notably absent from this conversation. "It's the best solution for everyone." Tell me, I asked conversationally. Have you and Melissa budgeted for the mortgage payments once I move out? Adam blinked momentarily confused. The mortgage is paid off from what Melissa told me. It is, I confirmed. And the property taxes. They're quite substantial for this neighborhood. Have you factored those into your budget? Adam's expression flickered with uncertainty before he regained his composure. We can manage the taxes and insurance. I've gotten a significant raise since we moved in. I see, I nodded thoughtfully. And who do you think will be responsible for those payments once I move to Whispering Pines? Well, obviously, Melissa and I would take over the expenses related to the house, Adam stated, as if explaining something obvious. And why would you do that? I asked, my voice still calm. Adam looked at me with growing impatience. Because we'd be living here, and you wouldn't. Adam, I said, setting down my teacup with a gentle clink, whose name do you think is on the deed to this house? A flash of confusion crossed his face. Well, I assumed it would be yours and Melissa's, or that it would transfer to her when you move out. The moment had arrived. I reached into the drawer of the side table, where I kept important documents, and pulled out the property deed, sliding it across the table toward him. This house belongs solely to me, Adam. Thomas left it to me, not to Melissa. She knows this, though we haven't discussed it much since you moved in. The house will pass to Melissa as an inheritance upon my death, but not before, and certainly not simply because I might change my living arrangements. Adam stared at the document, his face flushing as he processed this information. But we've been living here, maintaining the property, making improvements. You've been living here as my guests, I corrected him gently. The improvements, as you call them, were never requested by me. In fact, many of them were made despite my objections or without my knowledge. Adam's shock quickly transformed into indignation. This is ridiculous. We had an understanding when we moved in. We've invested thousands in upgrades. The only understanding, I replied, was that you would stay temporarily while saving for your own place. That was over 18 months ago. Since then, you've systematically tried to edge me out of my own home, rearranged and discarded my possessions, and now you're trying to ship me off to a retirement community so you can take over completely. Adam stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. You've been planning this all along, haven't you? Letting us think this would be our home eventually. That's deceptive, Kay. No more deceptive than referring to it as our house to your colleagues, or planning to demolish features of my home without consulting me or discussing how to convince the old lady to move to a facility, I replied, revealing I had overheard his conversation the previous evening. Adam's face paled, then reddened again with anger. You were spying on me, in my own home. My home, I corrected firmly. And yes, I listened to conversations taking place in my house about my future, without my consent. Adam snatched his phone from the table. I'm calling Melissa. This is unbelievable. You can't just change the terms of our arrangement now. I haven't changed anything, Adam. You assumed terms that never existed. As Adam stormed out to make his call, I remained at the table, hands trembling slightly but resolve firm. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again, in control of my own home and future. While Adam frantically called Melissa, I calmly contacted Eleanor, my longtime lawyer, and friend, to reconfirm my legal position and rights. Though I was confident in my ownership, I wanted to be prepared for any challenges Adam might attempt to mount. The deed is clear, Kay, Eleanor reassured me after I explained the situation. The house is solely in your name. They've made no legal claim to it by living there as guests, even if they did pay for some improvements. Those would legally be considered gifts unless there was a written agreement stating otherwise. What about their belongings and the improvements they've made? I asked. They can take their personal property, of course. As for improvements, attached fixtures generally stay with the house. If you wanted to be generous, you could offer to compensate them for some of the recent upgrades, but you're not legally obligated to do so. I thanked Eleanor and asked her to prepare some documentation just in case. Within the hour, Melissa rushed home, her face flushed with confusion and concern. Adam had clearly given her his version of events, painting me as a manipulative mother who had misled them about their living arrangement. The three of us gathered in the living room, the tension so thick it felt difficult to breathe. Melissa looked between us, clearly torn between the man she loved and her mother. "Mom," she began carefully, "Adam says you've suddenly announced that this is your house and we have no right to be here. Is that true?" "Not exactly," I replied, maintaining my composure. "What I clarified for Adam is that this house belongs solely to me, not jointly to you and me, as he assumed. And that his plans to move me to a retirement community so you two can take over were made without consulting the actual homeowner." "But we've been contributing to the household, making improvements," Melissa protested, echoing Adam's earlier argument. "Yes, as my guests I acknowledged. Which I appreciated until those contributions became a campaign to edge me out of my own home." "That's not fair," Adam interjected. "We've been trying to help modernize the place, make it more functional." "Let me show you something," I said, retrieving my journal from my room. Over the past months, I had meticulously documented every incident, complete with dates, and sometimes photographs. This is a record of the changes made to my home without my consent, the comments made about my competence and belongings, and the gradual removal of my presence from the common areas. I handed the journal to Melissa, who began reading with a furrowed brow. Adam shifted uncomfortably on the sofa. "There's more," I continued, pulling out my phone. I recorded some conversations in which Adam discussed his plans for the house after getting me moved out. Adam's face drained of color as I played a recording from the previous night's gathering, capturing his comments about convincing the old lady to move to a facility and his plans for renovations that would erase my presence from the Faxamstead. The home. "You recorded me," Adam sputtered. "That's an invasion of privacy." "In my house, Adam," I reminded him quietly, "where you were discussing plans to remove me from my own home without my knowledge or consent." Melissa looked up from the journal, her expression shifting from confusion to shock as she processed the extent of Adam's behavior. "Adam, did you really say these things? Did you really move Mom's belongings to the attic without asking?" Adam attempted to defend himself, painting me as oversensitive, exaggerating, stuck in the past. "Your mother refuses to embrace change, Melissa. She's living in the past with your father's old things, cluttering up a house that could be beautiful and modern. I was trying to help her move forward, help us all have a better living situation." But as the evidence mounted, the journal entries, the recordings, the brochures for senior living, with tours already scheduled, in my name, Adam's narrative began to unravel. "I've invited some people who can verify some of these incidents," I said, checking my watch. Right on cue, the doorbell rang. Barbara from next door and my friend Judith had agreed to come share their observations of Adam's behavior toward me over recent months. Barbara spoke of witnessing Adam talking over me, making decisions about the garden without consulting me, and treating me like a guest rather than the homeowner. Judith described the changes she had observed in my confidence and comfort level in my own home. "Kay used to be so at ease here," Judith told Melissa. "Lately she's been like a nervous guest in her own living room. It's been heartbreaking to watch." Adam grew increasingly defensive as more evidence emerged. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "You've all blown this completely out of proportion. I was trying to help make improvements to an outdated house and help Kay transition to a place better suited for her needs. My needs," I stated firmly, "include living in the home I shared with my husband, surrounded by the memories we built together for as long as I am able. That decision is mine alone to make." I turned to Melissa, whose eyes were filled with tears of confusion and hurt. "Honey, I'm not asking you to choose between us right this moment, but I am setting a clear boundary. This is my home. I will not be pressured to leave it. If you and Adam wish to continue living here, there need to be clear agreements about respect, consultation, before changes are made, and recognition of whose home this actually is." Adam scoffed. "This is absurd. We're not children who need permission." "No," I agreed, "you're adults who need to respect the homeowner's rights and wishes, or find another place to live." Melissa looked torn, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, can I have some time to process all this? It's a lot to take in." "Of course," I said gently. "Take whatever time you need. I'm not asking for immediate decisions, just respect." Adam attempted one last manipulation. "Melissa, if your mother forces us out, we'll have to start from scratch. All the money we've put into this place gone. Is that what you want? To choose your mother's stubbornness over our marriage? Our future? I remained silent, allowing Melissa to see the emotional blackmail for what it was. She wiped her tears and straightened her shoulders. I need space to think, Adam. I'm going for a walk. She turned to me. Mom, I'm sorry. I had no idea things had gotten this bad. I should have paid more attention. After Melissa left, Adam and I sat in tense silence for several minutes. Finally, he stood. This isn't over, Kay. Melissa will see reason once she calms down. We've built a life here. You've built assumptions, I corrected him. On my property, without my consent. There's a difference. As the day progressed, I gave Melissa the space she needed. Meanwhile, I contacted my support group for older adults facing family housing conflicts. They had helped me develop the confidence to stand up for myself, and now they offered advice on handling the aftermath of the confrontation. That evening, Melissa returned from her walk and asked to use my laptop. Hours later, she knocked on my bedroom door, her expression troubled but resolved. Mom, I found something you should see, she said, leading me to the dining room where my laptop lay open. I was looking through Adam's emails to try to understand his perspective better. I found these. On the screen were emails between Adam and a real estate agent dating back 3 months. They discussed the potential market value of his house once certain renovations were completed and the current elderly resident was relocated. There were estimates for extensive renovations that would have essentially erased every trace of the home Thomas and I had created together. There's more, Melissa said quietly, showing me emails, revealing Adam had secretly taken out several personal loans using the expected inheritance of the house as his justification to lenders, promising to repay once the house was theirs. To mortgage, or sell. I had no idea, Melissa whispered. He told me the renovation plans were just ideas, nothing serious yet. He never mentioned loans or selling. The evidence was irrefutable. Adam had been systematically planning to take over my home, counting on my eventual relocation to claim what was never his. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time, in months secure in the knowledge that the truth was finally in the open. The next morning, I offered Adam a compromise. He could change his behavior, acknowledge my ownership, and we could establish clear boundaries for continued shared living. Or he could leave. This is ridiculous, he sputtered. After everything we've invested here, the choice is yours, I said calmly. But it needs to be made within 1 week. Adam spent the next days attempting various tactics, trying to win Melissa back to his side, suggesting I was mentally unstable, threatening vague legal action. But with the evidence mounting against him, and Melissa's growing awareness of his manipulation, his position weakened by the hour. On the 6th day, Adam announced he would be moving out. This family is impossible, he declared, blaming everyone but himself for the situation. As he packed his belongings, I maintained a dignified distance, neither gloating nor apologizing. When he attempted one final confrontation in the driveway, accusing me of destroying his marriage, I simply stated, "Your actions, not mine, have brought us to this point, Adam. I wish you well, but this is my home, and I will not be intimidated out of it." After Adam's departure, Melissa temporarily moved into the guest room, needing space from both the basement that reminded her of her failing marriage and the mother she had unwittingly allowed to be mistreated. The house felt different, quieter, emptier in some ways, but also more peaceful. "I should have seen it," Melissa said one evening as we shared tea in the kitchen. Looking back, there were so many signs. "We see what we want to see in those we love," I told her gently. "I don't blame you, Melissa." In the days that followed, our community rallied around us. Barbara brought dinner. Judith organized a small gathering of my friends to help restore my garden to its former state. Even my sister Linda called daily from Arizona, offering emotional support. Slowly, Melissa and I began having honest conversations about boundaries and expectations. "I'd like to stay, if that's okay," she said cautiously, about a week after Adam left, "but I want to do it right this time. Clear agreements, shared responsibilities, mutual respect." I'd like that I told her sincerely. "This will always be your home too, Melissa. Just not at the expense of my dignity or comfort." We drafted a simple agreement, outlining shared expenses, consultation procedures for any changes to common areas and privacy expectations. It wasn't legally necessary, but it helped clarify the understanding between us, preventing future misunderstandings. As Melissa began divorce proceedings, she discovered even more of Adam's deceptions: unauthorized credit cards. In her name loans, she had never approved plans he had made, assuming control of assets that were never his. My lawyer Eleanor helped guide her through the complex process of disentangling her finances from his. Through it all, I maintained my dignity and focus. This wasn't about winning or revenge. It was simply about standing my ground, protecting what was rightfully mine, and teaching my daughter that boundaries are not just permitted, but necessary for healthy relationships. The house that had almost been taken from me became once again truly my own. The consequences of standing my ground rippled through every aspect of our lives in the months that followed. Adam vacated the house as promised, taking only his personal belongings and the furniture he had purchased. The modern appliances remained a small victory for him, perhaps, but I found I actually enjoyed the more efficient refrigerator once I learned to use it properly. Melissa threw herself into the divorce proceedings with a determination I had never seen in her before. With Eleanor's guidance, she discovered the full extent of Adam's financial manipulations. Not only had he taken out personal loans based on his assumption of eventually controlling my house, but he had also opened credit cards in Melissa's name without her knowledge. He said he was handling our finances because I was too busy with work travel, Melissa explained one evening, looking stunned as she reviewed the credit reports Eleanor had obtained. I trusted him completely. Trust isn't a failing, I assured her, squeezing her hand. Betraying it is. The divorce process revealed Adam's pattern of deception extended far beyond our household. Former colleagues came forward with stories of business ideas he had claimed as his own clients he had misled about his authority within his company. His carefully constructed facade began to crumble on multiple fronts simultaneously. Adam didn't leave quietly. True to his nature, he attempted to shape the narrative among our shared social circles. Friends Melissa had made through Adam began to distance themselves, clearly having heard his version of events. Some mutual acquaintances called or visited carefully, probing for the real story, clearly having heard Adam's distorted version. I heard Kay forced Adam out because she's becoming unstable with age. One of Melissa's friends mentioned, causing Melissa to end that friendship on the spot. My mother is the strongest, most stable person I know, she had informed the woman before asking her to leave. Rather than engaging in a public battle of narratives, I chose dignity and truth. When directly asked, I shared the facts without embellishment or bitterness. More often, I allowed Adam's behavior to speak for itself, which it inevitably did as more people recognized the pattern of manipulation. My home gradually transformed back into a sanctuary. We repainted the living room in the warm honey color Thomas had always loved. The family photos returned to the hallway wall. My porcelain bird collection reclaimed its place of honor in the living room cabinet. Thomas's vinyl records moved from the attic to the custom shelving in the den where they belonged. Melissa established a new routine that respected both our needs for privacy and togetherness. We shared dinner 3 times a week but maintained our separate spaces and activities on other days. She took over management of the garden, discovering a passion for growing vegetables that connected her to her father's memory in unexpected ways. Dad would have known how to deal with these tomato hornworms, she laughed one Saturday, showing me the large green caterpillars she had removed from the plants. Actually, he would have done exactly what you're doing, I told her. He believed in handling garden pests by hand, not with chemicals. These small moments of connection helped heal the distance that had grown between us during Adam's influence. Slowly, Melissa emerged from the fog of manipulation, recognizing how Adam had subtly driven wedges between us, isolating her from my perspective and concerns. He always had a reason why I shouldn't worry about you, she confessed one evening. He said you were just resistant to change, that all mothers have trouble letting their daughters grow up. He made it seem like your concerns were just about controlling me, not about how he was treating you. The most effective manipulators make their victims feel like they're the compassionate ones. I observed thinking of how Adam had framed his attempt to move me to a retirement community as concern for my welfare. The legal consequences for Adam were minimal in a material sense. Since no actual theft had occurred, and the emotional manipulation wasn't technically illegal, his punishment came primarily in the form of damaged professional relationships and a divorce settlement that required him to repay the loans, taken under false pretenses. However, the personal consequences were substantial. He lost the comfortable living situation he had tried to secure through manipulation. His reputation among colleagues suffered as his pattern of behavior became apparent. Most significantly, he lost Melissa, whose eyes were now fully open to his true character. 4 months after Adam moved out, Melissa received the final divorce papers. We marked the occasion not with celebration but with quiet acknowledgement of the painful growth we had both experienced. "I keep wondering how I didn't see it," Melissa said, as we sat on the back patio watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. "Manipulators are skilled at what they do," I reminded her, "and love makes us want to believe the best about people." "I've learned so much from watching how you handled this, Mom," she said, her eyes filling with tears. "You never lost your dignity, never stooped to his level. You just stood firmly in your truth." Those words meant more to me than any material possession ever could. In standing up for myself, I had also taught my daughter a profound lesson about self-respect and boundaries. As for me, I joined an advocacy group for elder rights at Eleanor's suggestion, sharing my story to help others recognize and resist similar manipulation. At one meeting, I met Grace, whose son-in-law had successfully pressured her into signing over her home, leaving her financially vulnerable when the marriage later ended. "I wish I had stood my ground like you did," Grace told me, after hearing my story. "I thought giving them what they wanted would keep the peace and make them love me more." "It's never too late to reclaim your power," I assured her, helping connect her with legal resources to explore her options. Through these new connections, I found purpose in my experience, transforming a painful chapter into wisdom that could help others. The house that had almost been taken from me became a gathering place for women sharing similar stories, a safe harbor in the storm of family conflicts over property and autonomy. Melissa and I established new traditions that honored our relationship while respecting our individual lives. Sunday brunches in the garden, monthly movie nights featuring classics from Thomas's collection. Small rituals that rebuilt our bond on a foundation of mutual respect, rather than obligation or assumption. As life settled into new patterns, I reflected often on the importance of clear boundaries and documentation. Having the deed readily available, keeping a detailed journal of incidents recording crucial conversations, these practical steps had made all the difference in protecting what was rightfully mine. More importantly, I had learned to trust my instincts. The uneasiness I had felt as Adam's behavior shifted wasn't senior paranoia as he had tried to suggest, but a legitimate response to being systematically edged out of my own space. The house remained my sanctuary, my connection to Thomas, and now a symbol of my strength and self-advocacy. Each room held memories of both the difficult recent past and the decades of joy that preceded it. By refusing to be displaced, I had preserved not just a property, but a legacy of love and resilience that would eventually pass to Melissa when the time was right, not when someone else decided it should be theirs. 6 months after Adam's departure, the house settled into a new rhythm that honored both my needs and Melissa's. The tension that had permeated every corner during Adam's campaign to claim ownership had dissipated, replaced by a gentle harmony of two independent women sharing space with mutual respect. The basement suite where Adam and Melissa had lived was transformed into a proper guest apartment, occasionally used when my sister Linda visited from Arizona or when Melissa's college friends needed a place to stay. Melissa chose to move into the sunny second bedroom upstairs, which we redecorated together in soothing blues and greens. "I sleep better up here," she confessed. "The basement holds too many memories of arguments I didn't even know were happening at the time." I had reclaimed my space without apology, hanging Thomas's photographs where they belonged, returning my books to the built-in shelves in the living room, playing my favorite classical music while cooking dinner. Small actions that collectively represented a profound reclaiming of my rightful place in my own home. My advocacy work with elder rights groups expanded, giving me a sense of purpose that transcended my personal experience. Every Tuesday, I joined a panel of speakers who shared their stories with social workers, elder law attorneys, and family counselors, helping professionals recognize signs of elder manipulation and financial abuse. What surprises most people, I would explain to these audiences, is how gradual and subtle the process can be. It starts with small comments, minor rearrangements of your belongings, subtle questions about your competence. By the time someone is openly suggesting you move to a retirement community, a foundation of diminishment has already been laid. Through this work, I connected with women like Martha, whose daughter and son-in-law had convinced her to add them to her home deed for estate planning purposes, only to find herself pushed into a small back bedroom when they decided to start a family. And Doris, whose nephew had moved in temporarily after his divorce, then gradually taken over the home while treating her as an unwelcome guest. These stories affirmed that what had happened to me wasn't unique or personal, it was part of a larger pattern that needed addressing through education and advocacy. Each time I helped another woman recognize manipulation, before it progressed too far, I felt Thomas would be proud of how I had transformed a painful experience into something meaningful. Melissa completed her divorce in record time, Adam's financial deceptions actually speeding the process as the judge recognized the pattern of manipulation. She threw herself into rebuilding her career, earning a promotion that allowed her to reduce her travel schedule and spend more time developing local environmental projects. "I'm dating again," she mentioned casually one Sunday morning as we worked side by side in the garden. 6 months had passed since the divorce was finalized, and I had noticed a lightness returning to her step. "Anyone special?" I asked carefully, pruning a tomato plant. Maybe she smiled. "His name is Ryan. He's an environmental science teacher at the high school. We met at a river cleanup event." She paused, looking at me directly. "I'm taking it very slowly this time, Mom. Really getting to know him before making any decisions." "That sounds wise," I said, resisting the urge to offer more advice. Melissa had learned her own valuable lessons from the experience with Adam. She didn't need me to reiterate them. As for me, I had begun accepting occasional dinner invitations from Frank, my neighbor of 30 years, who had lost his wife around the same time Thomas died. Nothing romantic, just the comfortable companionship of old friends who understood each other's histories. "Thomas would approve," Frank said one evening as we walked back from the local Italian restaurant. "He always said you were too vibrant to ever be alone." "I'm not sure about that," I laughed. "But I do know he'd want me to enjoy whatever time I have left." My own social life had expanded in ways I hadn't anticipated. With the cloud of Adam's disapproval lifted, I reconnected with old friends, joined a watercolor painting class at the community center, and even started hosting monthly potluck dinners in our backyard. The renovation projects Adam had begun were completed, but on my terms. The kitchen modernization proved useful, but I insisted on keeping Thomas's handcrafted china cabinet that Adam had planned to demolish. The outdoor space incorporated a stone patio for entertaining, but preserved the vegetable garden Thomas and I had tended for decades. These compromises between old and new reflected my evolving philosophy about change. Not all of it was threatening, but it needed to happen with respect for what came before. The house, like me, could embrace new elements without erasing its history. Perhaps the most significant healing came through my relationship with Melissa. The experience had forced us to confront uncomfortable truths about how we communicated and the boundaries we needed to maintain a healthy mother-daughter relationship. "I should have listened when you first expressed concerns about Adam," she acknowledged during one of our heart-to-heart talks. "I dismissed your feelings because it was easier than confronting the possibility that I had made a mistake in marrying him. And I should have been more direct instead of trying to preserve peace at all costs," I admitted. By not clearly stating my boundaries early on, I allowed the situation to progress too far. These honest conversations, painful as they sometimes were, rebuilt our relationship on a foundation of authenticity rather than the conflict avoidance that had characterized our interactions during Adam's tenure in our home. The financial lessons were equally important. I updated my will and estate plan with Eleanor's help, creating clear documentation that would prevent future misunderstandings or manipulation. Melissa and I had an open conversation about inheritance expectations, something many families avoid until crisis forces the issue. "This house will be yours someday," I told her directly, "but not until I'm ready to leave it, whether that's through death or my own choice to downsize. And when that happens, it should support your life, not define it." Melissa nodded, understanding the deeper message about not building future plans on assumptions about inheritance or property. The practical wisdom gained from this experience became a gift I shared freely with others: the importance of documenting ownership clearly, the value of keeping journals when something feels wrong, the necessity of creating support networks before crises occur, the courage to stand firm when pressured to make decisions that don't serve your best interests. More profoundly, I learned that ownership transcends property. It extends to our decisions, our boundaries, our right to determine the course of our later years. By defending my home, I had really been defending my autonomy, my dignity, my right to age on my own terms. As the seasons changed and life settled into new patterns, the house that had been a battleground became once again a sanctuary, not just for me, but for anyone who needed a safe harbor. Melissa occasionally brought colleagues facing housing insecurity for temporary stays in the basement apartment. I hosted support group meetings for older women navigating complex family dynamics. The home Thomas and I had created together continued its legacy of warmth and welcome, enriched rather than diminished by the challenges we had overcome. "The house is just a structure," I told a group of women at one of our advocacy meetings. "What matters is that it remains a foundation for building the life you choose, not the life others try to impose upon you." That philosophy became my guiding principle as I moved forward, creating a life of purpose and joy that honored Thomas's memory while embracing new possibilities. The house that Adam had tried to claim became not the end of my story, but the setting for its most vibrant chapters. Have you ever had to stand your ground to protect something that was rightfully yours? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more tales of finding strength in unexpected moments. Share this with someone who might need a reminder that it's never too late to reclaim your power. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the greatest act of love is setting clear boundaries.